Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's expert talk on the important topic of avoiding scam on Upwork. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be available for reviewing at any time on our community events page. I'm going to drop that link in the chat right now. Bookmark that site, it's a good one. And just a quick disclaimer here, please be aware that the content being discussed here is not a substitute for any legal advice. In the unfortunate experience of falling victim to any scam or fraud, please contact a legal professional for advice. What we're going to be discussing here today is to avoid this situation. So for those that don't know me, my name is Will Simpson, and I am an event manager here at Upwork. And we're lucky to be joined today by Upwork's Senior Director of Trust and Safety, Caitlyn McNerney. Thank you so much for joining us today, Caitlyn.
Absolutely, Will. Happy to be here.
All right. Today we're going to be covering the topics of a little situational awareness on where we're at with scam. We did a version of this event about a year ago, roughly the same time, and this is a constantly evolving topic. So we're going to have sort of a regular cadence finding out what's going on. So we're going to look at how best to identify potential scam postings and then how to report suspected scam if you've encountered it. So just so we're all on the same page here, that for the context of this presentation, we define scam as a job post or subsequent communications originating from a job post with the intent of the client to defraud an independent professional out of money. And I'm pretty sure we've all seen examples of this, whether it's on Upwork or out there in the wild internet. So we're going to get equipped with the right information today. So since our last event on this topic last year, I understand that the Upwork Trust and Safety team has continued putting an immense amount of work and resources into keeping the platform as safe as possible for its members. Can you please give us a high-level overview of where things stand in regards to scam right now?
Yeah, sure thing. And I'm going to differentiate here between where it stands overall in the industry and then where we are with Upwork, because we're seeing really important key differences for the better in terms of how this is showing up on Upwork recently. So for those of you who may be new to this topic and didn't join us last year when we spoke about the impact of scam in the job posting marketplace, the 2022 calendar year and even into 2023, we're continuing to see increased scam job postings and attempts across the industry. And the reason that this has been so significant over the last year plus is that more individuals than like really ever before are applying for jobs. And that's either because of, the great reshuffle, as we referred to it in the US, or folks who have recently been experienced layoffs, looking for work in alternative means and so forth, and maybe moving into a consulting and freelancing kind of moment in their careers. And so we're seeing a lot more job seekers. So that paired with the normalcy that's been brought about of doing phone and video interviews over the last couple of years makes it possible for scammers to sort of hide in plain sight, where their sort of like non-traditional interview methods are now very much the norm for so many of us after the last couple of years of activity. So this combination really makes the macro environment for scammers really attractive. And so within Trust and Safety, we've not only validated this using our own data on Upwork, but also working with intelligence institutions such as the Federal Bureau of Investigations here in the US to validate that this is what's going on here and what's leading to this higher rate of scam attempts. So what I can say is that the prevalence of scam jobs on the Upwork platform, despite the number of attempts we've seen, has gone down significantly due to the efforts that we've put forth here. And that's not the same necessarily across the industry. As I talk to my colleagues in Trust and Safety and track this issue as it, just experience in terms of like wherever you're looking for a job, this is still very much a prevalent MO and one that we're staying really vigilant on. And of course, we want to make sure that you all have the information to be vigilant for yourselves as you're out there working and so forth. So thanks, Will.
Yeah, it's great to hear that we're seeing some positive numbers on the Upwork side, even though just as a whole it is a very large beast to try and wrangle. So, but good to see that we're getting out in front of it. So let's take a look at what Upwork does to combat scam, because a lot of this, as I understand it, happens on the backside that we may not see. Now, I know that Upwork historically and currently has a very proactive approach to trust and safety on the Upwork platform. From my years of experience as a freelancer on the platform, this is one of the areas which really set Upwork apart from other providers in this space and drew me to it in the first place. Can you speak to some of the steps and precautions that Upwork takes to prevent scam from occurring?
Absolutely. So, over the course of last year, and we're continuing these efforts into 2023 as well, as I said, we're staying really vigilant in this area. We significantly bolstered our machine learning detections to catch new scam tactics. So, scammers are constantly changing their methods because they want to avoid being caught. So, if they keep doing the same things, they know that we'll pick up on that. So, they're constantly evolving. So, those machine learning methods allow us to evolve alongside them and creating agile systems that are really layered to protect the platform. In addition, we're looking to carefully balance the client onboarding experience and the ease of joining the platform with enhanced checks of client accounts. So, we know that bringing new clients onto the platform is essential to the success of freelancers who operate their businesses on Upwork. And we therefore don't want to be overly restrictive in onboarding. However, we do want to make sure that we're implementing those checks in various ways at multiple stages in the client onboarding journey. So, some clients may be asked to provide additional validation at onboarding, others before sending their first message, etc. And we've started intentionally varying that experience based on not only information that we know about the client, but also just to randomize the experience to some extent so that scammers, it's a lot harder for them to navigate around those protections and defenses of our platform. And I'm really careful here in what I'm sharing because we all know that scammers do their research. And so, around some of these detections, I'm going to be intentionally just really careful in what I share. But please know we've been really thoughtful in putting a lot of work behind these efforts. And last but certainly not least, one of the things that we continue to believe is so important is education of our freelancer community as an essential part of combating scam. So, scammers can only find success when they convince freelancers to move off platform and send them payments. So, with this in mind, we've updated the product with frequent reminders and education for freelancers, hosted webinars like this one, posted in our community, and so forth. And we're continuing to look into other ways to bring this front and center into the product itself. So the message is this: payments should only flow in one direction, and that's from clients to freelancers. If a client is trying to convince a freelancer, and they can be very creative and convincing here, it's highly suspect. And so we really just want to make sure you all are armed to protect yourselves and know what to look out for.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that we'll probably bring up a few times here. And I wanted to highlight this very important statement. If you take nothing else away from this event, money only flows one direction on Upwork, from the client to the freelancer. Never does it go from the freelancer to the client. And that's as long as you keep that in mind, you'll dodge a lot of bad experiences for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a look at some of these different scam methods. We've talked about what we've been doing to prevent it and what's going on in the world at large. Let's take a look at how it's actually being executed. So the first new prominent scam method we're going to take a look at is using a freelancer scam mule account. This one's a new one for me, but I was learning more about this approach and it made me realize that I think I've seen one or two examples of this approach in the marketplace in the past year. It didn't fully trigger all the red flags, but it seemed a little bit sus. In the future, I'm going to be sure to report them to the proper channels to investigate further, and we will look into reporting suspicious posts in just a minute here. But Caitlin, do you want to tell us a little bit more about this scam method?
Yeah, so this is really about a client asking other freelancers, and this is a scam client in this example, asking other freelancers to help them with some of their scam activities. And the reason this may not look suspicious is that they may say, "Hey, I need you to help me with my recruiting." They'll give some reason as to why they can't directly recruit or interview for themselves. And this is different from like a lead generation job because what they're asking to do is instead say, hey, and then once you have that person who's really interested, then let's move them off platform. Here's the information for the hiring manager, so to speak, that they're going to speak to. So it's really about them asking, hey, find freelancers who want to work for me and then help me move them off platform. And so what they're asking freelancers to do is break Upwork's terms of service, and they're trying to engage you in scamming other individuals, which is, really not okay and not something I think anybody here wants a job in doing. So they're looking for help and taking advantage of other freelancers here. So in some instances, this can substantially put your own account at risk if you engage at this. So we really want to make sure that you're steering clear. So anyone who's asking you to move people off platform and violate terms, really be suspect of those types of jobs.
Yeah, definitely. So in this sort of scenario, they would be having you be the intermediary, but still hiring you as a freelancer. That's interesting there. Um, can you give us an example scenario of what this would look like in practical sense, like on the
Yeah, I think
platform?
it might be, I'll just kind of play in here at Will of like, hey, Will, I, think you'd be great given your freelancing experience at helping us find other freelancers for this job. I'm unable to do all this hiring myself. And so I'd really love you to help me. Um, I need you to find freelancers. Like, here's the information that you send them. And once they're interested, here's this off messaging platform number that we want them to get in touch with in terms of a hiring manager. Try to send out these many messages a day. And it might not hit all of those benchmarks, but it's really about asking you to connect people off platform and bringing
Yeah.
you into this kind of mule type activity.
Wow, that's a dangerous one because I know, as someone who's experienced on the freelancer side of the platform, I try and put myself in sort of a project manager role with my clients, and this fits nicely into that groove of, hey, help me, run my business and do my workflow. So thank you for expanding on that one. This is a particularly sneaky approach, I think. So good to be aware of. Let's take a look at number two. The next scan method is one that I've encountered in the past, as have quite a few fellow freelancers in my network. Luckily, we've all stayed on top of Upwork's best practices and reported any suspicious postings like the method described here. As we mentioned earlier, the best advice I've heard regarding this approach is simply money only flows from the client to the freelancer, never the other way around. So tell us a little bit about this scam outside of the obvious, just send me money.
Yeah. So for this one, they're asking you to make payments on their behalf. Sometimes they're saying, like, oh, I'm going to overpay you, so you'll get to keep that difference and so forth. And they'll make up some really convincing reasons of just like, oh, I'm having, challenges with my bank, or try to get you to engage here. And they'll often do this kind of incentive where, like, okay, you're going to get to keep this difference as a bonus. The problem is that payment's never going to come through, bonus or otherwise, and you're going to be out that payment. So really, just regardless of the reasoning or convincing, narrative that they're spinning here, don't make payments on behalf of a client here. I will caveat this with, there are situations where once you have an established relationship with a client, you are contracted, and you may do like reimbursements for expenses that you incur, but those should be expenses that you have agreed upon that are like tied to the work that you're doing, maybe materials that you need or so forth. And again, with somebody that you trust that you're already in a contract with. And that's not right out the gate. They're asking you to do that. You've already been paid for completed work, and then you're expensing, say, I needed to do X, Y, or Z, and like submitting that expense. It's not them asking you to take on an expense tied to the
Right.
job. It's all, so I'll caveat that just because there are some use cases where this can occur. But again, further down in the relationship, once you've already received some payment for the work that you're doing and you're filing those expenses and so forth. So
Yeah, definitely. I think the most common one that I've encountered is, hey, we're going to send you a company laptop. You just send us a deposit of $200. And to me, I'm like, oh, that sounds reasonable. A business sending you a laptop is not an abstract thing in today's work model. But yeah, definitely right out the gate, asking for any sort of money to flow the other direction is a major red flag. So let's take a look at number three. The next scam method is not a new method, but evidently still an effective one if it's still being used today. I know from many of our past events, this is one of the main drivers behind why keeping your communications with prospects and clients on the Upwork platform is strongly suggested. For those that are not already aware, it is part of the Upwork terms of service that we must keep any communications with prospective clients, those who you do not have a contract with yet, on the Upwork platform. Although I still strongly suggest that you always just keep communications on the platform whenever possible. If you ever need help from the Upwork support staff, who are amazing, by the way, this is a critical piece for them to be able to assist you. If they can't see the dialogue and what happened, their hands are a bit tied in how they can support you. Caitlin, what are you seeing in this with this scam method?
Yeah, so scammers, one of the first things that they want to do is move those communications off platform. And that's often because if they've made it through our proactive detections, they know they've got a really tight window before they're likely to be actioned. And so if they're able to move any kind of current lead, so to speak, that they have in potential victims to another platform, even if their Upwork account gets shut down, they still have those open channels of communication. And so they're not only trying to avoid detection through our systems because we're looking out for things that they may say, but they also want to be able to continue those communications regardless of what happens to their Upwork account. And so that's a real driver for them in terms of their motivations as to why they want to move you to a separate chat or a phone call or just off platform entirely. So the real thing that we want to say is like before that contract is signed, and as you noted, like for support reasons, after the fact in your protection, really keeping those communications on platform is so important to your well-being and the ability to stay safe on the platform. Um, and I think one of the things that we're really doing here is bolstering that in product communication to just say, hey, before a chat starts, really be mindful of like keeping those communications here so that we can help protect you. Because a lot of times for new freelancers who have joined us recently, they may not realize that going off platform presents those additional risks. And so the value is really there to just make sure. So if you are getting a request from someone where they're sharing that contact information before a contract, please report that to us so we can take a look and action appropriately. And there's flagging even within the messaging room. So you're able to flag that right to our team without ever leaving the messaging system.
Perfect. And we're going to take a look at that in detail here before we get to the end of the presentation. It's a very important piece, I know. So let's dive into some of the red flags. We've talked about some of the primary methods, and we've talked about some of the ways that Upwork is preventing this from hitting the platform. But us as freelancers and independent professionals on the platform, we need to be equipped to just know what doesn't pass the Snell test when you're reading these job postings. So our trust and safety team has compiled a list of red flags for us to check out, which can help us stay away from the wrong jobs and any malicious parties posing as clients. And at the very least, give you reason to pause and report the posting if you're uncertain. So what's the first one we have here, Caitlin?
So here we have, again, using contact information, sometimes in the job description, sometimes just really earlier in dash messages, as we talked about. And we've done quite a bit to try to block these messages. However, sometimes they do get creative, and you will see them divide up phone numbers, make them look really, sort of non-suspect, but the methods often for them making them look non-suspect are highly suspect. So somebody is trying to hide that they are sending you contact information, really stop and question that. We've seen some creative use cases here where they've like written out the numbers in long strings in like their word form, or kind of interwoven them into sentences. They've gotten very creative here. So really just ask yourself, like, why is this person trying to hide so hard that they're sending contact
Right.
information? If they were following the rules of Upwork, they wouldn't need to do that. So that's why they're hiding. So really be cautious of any type of movement to off-platform communications. It's really not in your best interest to communicate, just keep it on Upwork and you're going to be a lot safer.
Absolutely. And to point on one of the comments in the chat here, some of these, a lot of the massive amount of these are getting screened out before they ever hit the platform. But there are so many different variables. Like if I type in a number 7, then write 6, and then there's weird ways to present some of this information. But you'll notice, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Caitlin, in the messaging system, if I put in a phone number or a web address, the system will pick up, hey, this is a contact thing, and it'll give you a little pop-up saying, hey, be careful of these communications. It has different sort of recognition patterns that it is looking for, right?
Yeah, so we're looking at really putting forth that education around contact info sharing. So you'll see that type of general educational message around. And so one of the things we're working on is really tuning our systems around like what is contact information sharing, and like because they have gotten really creative in this space to make sure that we're accurately detecting it.
Absolutely. Just one second here. System's acting a little bit up.
But you're correct, Will. When we're surfacing links or people are opening links that they're newly, we'll like have a little pop-up, I believe, that says like, are you like, do you know this person? Do you trust this link and so forth? Because, and we'll get into this in this next one, I can jump right in here if you'd like, in
Sure.
regards
Yeah,
to the
totally.
QR codes. The reason that we have that is the files that are shared within our messaging system, we go ahead and we scan those for malware to protect our customer base and to do what we can to really mitigate that risk. But if you're seeing these types of QR codes that are moving you off platform or links that are moving you off platform, we are then limited in the scanning that we can do of what you may encounter once you get to that website or you get to that outside communication channel. So by keeping it on platform, you're making sure that like the files that you're looking at and so forth are going to have been scanned.
Definitely. Now, there's a really good comment here in the general chat I wanted to address. It was asking, is asking to sign an NDA a red flag? Because I'm thinking through that workflow. If you're talking to a new client and they say, hey, before we really do a contract and we get into it, I need you to sign an NDA. So I'm going to send you maybe a PDF that you have to sign and send back. Is this a red flag?
So I would say we have not seen NDAs be a red flag. Some companies, just before they're sharing details of their job post, they have legitimate reasons to require an NDA. However, if they're asking you for any reimbursement costs associated with the NDA processing or anything suspect like that, then definitely be suspicious. But a standard NDA, and again, we encourage freelancers to make sure they're seeking legal advice about the contents of that NDA and what they're required within that, separate from Upwork and so forth. But we do not see that today tied to scam activity.
That's good. Yeah, that's an important one. I know I've worked in the tech security sector, and you sign an NDA before any serious conversation happens. A lot of proprietary information and techniques going into that. And there's sort of a little bit of confusion in the chat here on what constitutes taking communication off platform. So I'm going to throw out some examples. Keeping communication on platform. When we say that, that means on Upwork.com. That's through the messaging system there. That's through the Zoom video, through the actual platform itself. Examples of communicating off platform, what you don't want to do, especially when that isn't a contract, is Skype, Telegram, WhatsApp, Google Meet, anything like that. That is taking
Email.
communications, email, obvious, email. These are examples of taking them off platform, and they are red flags. And as we mentioned earlier, not every time a client knows that this is a bad behavior, but if they persist, even when you said, no, we can't do that, it's against the terms of service, a little bit of a red flag in itself. So let's take a look at the next one here.
And Will, you bring up a really good point just around discerning between potentially a new client who is new to the platform, doesn't understand the rules, and a scammer. If you're talking to a new client who's well-intentioned and you say, hey, I know you're, new to the platform, but just like the rules of the road here that we do need to keep communications pre-contract on the platform. Happy to chat with you about this job here. If they become angry or persistent, that's part of the scam MO a lot of times, is to kind of emotionally pressure you. And so like just you're best off walking away from those scenarios. Because a well-intentioned client is going to say most likely like, oh, whoops, didn't realize, like, happy to chat here.
Yeah, definitely. And there's an interesting method that Kat in the chat has been saying that she's utilizing. They include in their bio that they don't accept outside interviews. I love it. That's simple, and it's a simple screening thing just to say, "Hey, don't waste my time with this."
Yeah.
Good technique. I like that. All right.
Need to add
Uh,
that for our next recommendations of what to do. I like it.
yeah, it's a good idea. I love it. Okay, so the next one here is when the client has a bunch of open jobs, but no money spent. That is a red flag. And the example here may be a little bit difficult to read, so I'm going to call out some points on here for simplicity. The job description here seems great. No experience needed. They train new contractors and they pay them weekly or bi-weekly. They then provide a direct contact email external to the Upwork platform for interested parties, red flag. But we can also see that they have two open jobs, but a 0% hire rate. Now, two open jobs with a 0% hire rate isn't a massive amount. I've seen a lot higher, but it is definitely something to make you aware of, right?
Yeah, for sure. Scammers do not want to spend money. They want to make money off of other hardworking people. And so they're not typically, it's very rare for us to see spend or any substantial spend on the platform. We still do review jobs where there has been past spend just to make sure, we're keeping our eyes open and we're staying vigilant. However, kind of just looking at these signals of like, is this a new client, or do they have a high number of job postings and they haven't hired yet? This doesn't look like someone who's following through, or they're potentially just taking it off platform. So we're not seeing that here in terms of the higher rate.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the next one here. Um, this is a point of conversation in many of the events I host when a client is unverified payment method, and I've seen a few people chatting about that in the chat dialogue here. Now, you can see if a potential client has a verified method of payment or not on the right-hand side of the job posting. It's in the About Client section. They will have a little blue badge with a white check mark in it, accompanied by the Payment Method Verified tag, if they have successfully verified that payment method. Caitlyn, can you guide us through the importance of this payment verification badge and if this is a hard stopping point when considering applying for client projects?
Yeah, I would say that this signal alone is not a hard stopping point, but something just to be aware of as a freelancer working on the platform, that we have not yet verified this payment, and that before any work is done, you're going to want to make sure that that has been verified. So not a no-go out in and of itself, but definitely one to look out for. And we are just, I want to note here in terms of some of the work that we've done on our side, that nudging clients at different moments to add payment verification early life cycle is something that we're really looking into and have invested in testing, so that we can provide those clear signals to freelancers that that process has been completed. But Will, I know you have some really great process on your side just to say like, hey, maybe this is a new client. Let me guide
Yeah.
them through this. So would love for you to share that.
Yeah, we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I think this is an important thing to take note of. I've had experiences with clients who are brand new to the platform. They're unfamiliar with the processes and workflows. And for those that aren't familiar, the client side getting booted up and working is, I think, vastly more complex than the freelancer side of getting your profile up and running. Not to say that it's easy. I'm saying there are more steps and more directions you have to be aware of. Now, I view this as an opportunity to further build a relationship with the client in that trusted advisor type of role. While it is initially a red flag that they are unverified payment, I typically wait for this to be verified by a consistency of red flag behavior, like trying to then take payment methods off the platform when you've told them we cannot, or they keep trying to work outside the defined structure that you've established. For everyone's reference here, the process for a client to become payment verified could not be easier. They log into their Upwork account, they click on Settings in the drop-down menu under their user icon, top right corner. From there, On the left-hand side is a button for billing and payments, where a payment method can be added in a matter of moments. Remember, it is super important to ensure you do not begin work on a client project prior to that payment method being verified. You can start dialogue, you can do the interview, but do not do a minute of work until that has been verified. If they're not willing to do that, major red flag. All right. If a client is unwilling to take this step, it is just a clear red flag to part ways with this potential client project, and consider reporting the posting for further review from the Upwork teams directly. So take this as an opportunity to maybe guide a new, assuming positive intent, to guide a new client on the platform, but be wary of those multiple red flags and know when to cut ties.
Yeah, I love that,
Uh,
Will. I think it's such a great opportunity to build trust, again, as that trusted advisor, while also making sure that you've got the signals that you need as a freelancer to move forward with trust.
yeah. Now, those are the good question here. A little bit of a nuance in regards to taking communication off platform that I think is worth addressing. Maran was asking if the client wants a freelancer to be interviewed by their colleague or manager who is not on Upwork, is it okay to accept a call outside of Upwork in that scenario? I'm imagining that this is prior to a contract being established. This is during the initial interviewing phase. Perhaps they've done one interview on platform with the main person, and they said, "Sounds great. Let me get my boss, but he's not on Upwork or she's not on Upwork." What would you say in that scenario?
Yeah, I would say keep those communications on platform. There are certainly systems that they can use in terms of the Zoom integration and so forth to arrange for those. And, we while there is some work that's required in setting up a client account, it's not particularly time intensive. And so they can always work with those partners to make sure they're setting up a secondary account if need be. But keep those communications off platform, because we do see that as an MO of, hey, like, all looks great. I think you're aligned for this amazing job, but I just need you to talk to like someone in HR or the final decision
Yes.
maker. And that's where they move off platform, where they'll conduct some element of it on
Yeah.
Upwork. But if they're moving you off platform in this stage, I would say like really be wary of taking that, really make sure that you're staying on platform.
Definitely. And as we mentioned before, this social engineering is sort of the overarching term that I've heard before in regards to this, where people prey on the social norms. We want to be accommodating as independent professionals. We understand that there's usually a chain of command, and the person you talk to may be the middle step. These are all normal things. Like they don't make me think, oh, that's odd. But they're being utilized and used against us. So having that little bit of protection and self-awareness and that hard stop on communications on platform until contract, like these are very effective ways to just completely nullify that very crafty social engineering.
Yeah, and the reason we set these up is to make sure that we are protecting our community. So we have these rules where we like really do draw those firm lines in the best interest of our community, and making sure that folks are protected, just because it can get really hairy if they're moving off platform before that contract has been secured.
Yeah. A couple good points in the chat I wanted to call out. Reading the client feedback on the clients from other freelancers that have worked for them, that's key. Absolutely. You
So
can see
important.
on the job posting on the right-hand side, you can see what have they been rated by the people they've worked with and what are they saying. And if everyone says this person stole money, definitely obviously check that out. But if people are saying, hey, I've worked with Sally and she's fantastic. I've worked with Rob and he was great. He was great to work with. Then maybe you can say, okay, it's less likely that this is a malicious intent and maybe just not knowing the rules or the workflows. So definitely good to be aware of there. And Melina, just to address what you're saying there, the question is, after the contract is activated and the client wants to have a meeting off platform, is that okay? Yes, it's okay once the contract is in place. But again, I'm going to put a big asterisk on it. I strongly suggest that you guide conversations to happen through the platform, for the main benefit being if you need help from Upwork support down the line, there's a miscommunication, client ends up getting a bit prickly with you, whatever the case may be, Upwork can support you best if the communication has happened there and they can take a look at all the transcripts. So yes, you can take it off platform once there's a contract, but I would still suggest you keep it on platform. I hope that's clear. Right. The next one here is a red flag of a quick hiring process. Now, this one is a particularly crafty type of scam. I know my eyes light up when I see a fantastic sounding job that's just ready to go. Caitlin, can you tell us a little bit about what we should be looking for in this type of occurrence?
Yeah, so as we were speaking to earlier, this is definitely an approach from the social engineering side of things. So one of the things that scammers know is that when human beings are trying to make decisions quickly or, get really excited about an opportunity, we can sometimes put our blinders on to some of the red flags that we may be seeing, and making things really time bound, where they're saying like, we need you to meet with this person within a very quick turnaround of time, or we need you to accept, or we need you to do X, Y, or Z. There's definitely things that move quickly, but if you're feeling that undue pressure that they're trying to race you along, that's a very intentional move that they're trying to just make sure that you don't really have the time to think through, kind of get a good night's sleep and be like, should I really be buying this laptop and waiting on a reimbursement? That seems a little off, before you're just kind of having a moment to like think. So, we want to make sure you have those opportunities where a job, like you said, will like lights up your eyes, but at the same time, just like take a minute, take a breath. If you feel like you're being rushed along, and just like open yourself up to think, is there anything that's been suspicious here? Like, it's really strange that I'm being rushed. Just because that's a frequent fraud MO that folks will use, is like really trying to motivate people from an emotional sense as opposed to a logical sense.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it's very effective. It works on me. I know that you go to the car dealership, and they're trying to get you in the car now, sign the paperwork now, and I'm like, hold on, But hey, it's an effective technique, and when you're aware of it and looking for it, it gives you a little bit, or at least it gives me a bit of confidence to be like, hold on, if you're not willing to slow this down a minute, take a beat, and talk to me tomorrow, then
Yeah.
this isn't going to work anyway because you're too pushy to begin with. So. Uh, there was a good one that came up in the chat here. Susan was asking, what about clients who ask for a free sample or edit of your work? This is a topic that comes up in a lot of presentations we do. And I'm going to preface it with a few statements. Never do work for free. That's just blanket statement. Never do work for free. And it comes from this logic. If you don't respect your time, why would anyone else? If you're willing to give your work away for free, if you're willing to give away your time for free, why should anyone pay you for it? So, and this is not meant to be a nasty statement. This is like a logic workflow, and it's sort of how humans are sort of wired. If you're giving it away for free, then I don't know, is it worth me paying for it? Maybe it's not a good quality. So if clients are asking you to do sample work, I suggest you recommend maybe a beginner milestone. Maybe it's part of a big project, but they need to just make sure you're good at what you do. So great, why don't we set up a small milestone? You'll get an hour of work or a sample of work. It doesn't matter really what the amount of money is on that. It's just to make sure that they are willing to pay for your work and time. So never give the work away for free is what I suggest.
Thank you, Will. And just to clarify, it's against our terms of service for clients to be requesting that type of free work. So please feel to flag those for us. It's very normal to, as part of the interview process, they can certainly, if you want to provide samples of work you've already done, but asking for incremental unpaid work. So love that idea, Will, of setting up like a really, a small initial milestone to say like, hey, let's cover the cost of my time to do this sample and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And circling back to the quick hiring process here, it really underscores the importance of taking a moment to understand the context of your potential clients and the jobs they're posting. I know many of us fall into the habit of trying to pump out a high volume of proposals with an aim to land more jobs. It's a good approach. But as I've discussed in many other webinars, it's so important to take your time, not only in crafting a well thought out proposal, but taking the time to get an overall understanding of the client, their project, their experience on the platform with other independent professionals. We were talking about that ratings and reviews you can see on the right-hand side. This acts with dual purpose, not only to make your proposals much more targeted and likely to succeed, but also makes these red flags stand out a little bit so we can avoid those bad actors. Our last major red flag of today before we move into reporting is impersonating a known company. Now, I could see how this could be a difficult situation to identify, and I know from my own personal experience how excited I get to work for companies or brands that I recognize, as well as large, well-known sort of entities. What methods can we leverage to help protect ourselves from this type of situation?
So yeah, again, this is where keeping on platform is really important. And I know we have noted here that a lot of well-known companies are enterprise customers. So they're going to have that blue building icon that you can see on this slide here to notate them. But we do have, sizable companies operating on our platform who are not yet enterprise customers. And so, one of the things that can be really helpful here, because they do go to great lengths, these scammers, to hide and may even impersonate an individual who you can see on another platform does work for them. What you really want to be wary of is that they're saying like, hey, we're going to move this to email. Those emails may come even from kind of a similar looking address. One of the things that can be helpful is take a look just at how that company is presenting themselves and see if you see any sort of anomalies between, hey, they're directing me to this website that is abccompany.com an additional piece of it, but like the main website actually presents itself in this different formatting. And so that seems really odd that like most of this sort of like traffic, they may also send you to a website that looks far less mature than you'd expect. And again, even if it seems like a more mature company, if they're not an enterprise customer, keep those communications on platform, just to make sure that you're protecting yourself.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I was looking in the chat, so apologies if
Oh,
you've
yeah, no
already
worries.
addressed this. But the little blue TARDIS icon that we have there, that's the one you're going to see when it's badged as an enterprise client, and far more likely to be legit, I would say, in those larger entities, because I know that there's a lot of touch points when it comes to the enterprise client workflow. There's a lot more internal touch points with various Upwork teams. So I find it highly unlikely that a legitimate or illegitimate client would have that badge associated to it.
For
All
sure.
right, let's get into reporting suspicious activity. We've become aware of some red flags and some typical scam methods, and now how do we go ahead and report those? So when it comes to trust and safety on Upwork, it is a community effort. Upwork has incredible teams, technology, and processes in place which are constantly evolving to combat scam. But the power of crowdsourcing assistance from the front lines of our talent community really compounds the effectiveness of the scam prevention approach as a whole. I personally have had an experience encountering rather convincing scam in the past, but as some of the red flags started to surface, I knew it was time to report this user and the posting to Upwork. And I got to say, I was really surprised and impressed at how easy the process was, and it required very little of me. It didn't take hours out of my day or require me to get proof and evidence and show up to court or anything crazy like that. Simply report and off it went. So let's take a look at what that process looks like. So if you notice a suspicious job posting in the Upwork marketplace, there is the ability to flag as inappropriate along the right-hand side of the posting under the Submit a Proposal button there in green. When you click this button, it brings up a secondary screen where you can classify what category it falls into. In the instance of scam, we want to select Job Post Looks Like a Scam or Contains Suspicious Link and hit Submit. It's important to note that regardless of what category you select here from the list, all flagged items get reviewed by our internal teams. So no need to be overly concerned if you're not really sure how best to classify it. Just give it your best effort and then go ahead and submit it, especially if there's multiple categories it could fall into. Don't worry about it. We'll take a look and we'll take it from there. Now, Caitlin, once we go ahead and submit this suspicion of scam, what additional steps are required from us as an independent professional? Are there more actions needed, or does your team take it from there?
So we will take it from there. That's, this 30-second or so process is what we need from freelancers. And I just want to give a resounding thank you for those of you who flag within the community. And as Will and I were speaking about earlier, the vast majority of scam job postings are removed before they ever reach the platform. Over 90% of the attempts never make it onto the site. However, we do use the information that we receive through these flags to improve those proactive detections. So it's really so helpful for all of you that do report to let us know, because it does create this really great feedback loop to understand how are they trying new things, what hasn't been removed proactively so that we can get even better on that proactive side so that you're seeing less and less of this over time. So please, like, we thank you so much for taking that like 30 seconds to a minute to let us know, but we will take it from there. We review these flags and then take appropriate action when we see a terms of service violation.
Excellent. It's amazing, and I know that that you mentioned that 90% of the scam postings are screened before they ever hit the marketplace. Us, as being independent professionals on the platform, we don't see that 90%. All we see is the scam postings that we see. So I think it's an important to contextualize from this different level of visibility that you have how much scam is being prevented, and then we're left with what's remaining. But the ones that are remaining are typically the new methods, the crafty new approaches that we need to constantly evolve and address. So as you mentioned, the people on the front lines, us, the independent professionals, flagging these and letting us know this is how we stay ahead and we maintain a trusted network.
Yeah, and
Um,
huge thank you for myself and all of Trust and Safety for the work of our freelancers in doing so. We really appreciate it.
yeah, and I've seen some good call outs that after people have flagged inappropriate posts, they disappear pronto. That's good. That's great.
Good.
It probably means that there's a few people that have tagged it and we got in there. A good question from Victor. Can you be penalized for a false report? Like if I report something that looks suspicious, turns out it's not, does that negatively affect me? And does it negatively affect the client that I thought was a scam?
Yeah, so that is not going to negatively affect your account if you're in good faith saying, hey, this looks suspicious, and we realize, oh, this was just a bit of an odd job post, but like totally okay. No negative impact to your account. And on the client side, if when we're reviewing, we find like, hey, this is okay, that client will not have known that they were flagged. And so no negative repercussions for them either if we determine that there's not a terms of service violation.
Cool. Great question. I wanted to touch on another way that we can report suspected scam, and that's directly from the Upwork messaging system. You simply mouse over the text from the sender and then click on the ellipses, that's the three dots on the right-hand side. And from the drop-down menu which appears, click report message. What comes to mind here, Caitlyn, is something with the terms of service we all adhere to regarding keeping messages on platform. And we've talked to this a couple of times, it's just vital to keep those messages on platform. And a lot of people have said, what about this situation? What about that? And just to reiterate what we've said, what's our take on it from Upwork?
Yeah, keep it on platform. Please report these to us because a lot of the times where we do see scam that hasn't been detected in that 90% is because the job post itself doesn't give signals. It's the message after the job post that really raises those alarm bells. So please make sure you're reporting those as well, because that's oftentimes one of those like first signals that we're getting that something is awry here.
Perfect. All right, that's what we have, folks. We've got a little bit of time for Q&A. I'm going to dip in there in just a moment, but I wanted to drop some important links in the chat section here. This event is being recorded and will be available the same place you registered for in a few days. I'd just like to add closed captioning and get it uploaded. So here are some links to the Upwork events, where you can find this event and other events that have happened in the past, as well as what's coming up. I highly recommend you bookmark this site. We get a fantastic amount of events, some user-generated events like this, events where we talk to freelancers on the platform in a variety of situations. So it is a lot of fun. Also, at the once we close out this presentation, after a little bit of Q&A, you will get an email with a survey regarding this event. Just like you like it when clients give you feedback after a job, I like getting feedback from all of you because it helps me learn what's working, what's helpful, what else do we need to talk about to optimize your success. I don't do these events just for my own fun, although I do have a lot of fun doing them. They're here to help you. So taking a moment to fill it out really does a lot of help for us. So let me take a look at the Q&A section here. See what we can get in.
Thanks. While you're doing that, Will, I just want to reiterate that, especially when it comes to knowing what you want to hear more of from us, our team and Trust and Safety really want to be as transparent as possible with our community about the work that we're doing and how we protect you all. So if you have ideas there about other topics for us to bring forth and provide that greater transparency, we're all for it. So please respond to that survey and let us know what you'd like to hear more about.
Yeah,
Will and I
definitely.
love to talk to each other and work together, so happy
Oh
to do so.
yeah, it's great. So there's a couple questions here, some commentary going on the questions regarding people that have done work and they're not really getting paid for it, whether that's a small amount or whether that's hours and hours of work and not getting paid. There's an important workflow. We've talked about, not accepting or not doing any work until there's payment verified. That's a good step one. We talked about not taking the communication off platforms specifically before a contract. But once you've got that contract in place, talking about the scope of work and establishing a cadence on when you're going to get paid is important. And I will say the responsibility falls on us as independent professionals to set that stage. Again, we mentioned earlier, a lot of clients are new to the platform. They don't know the workflow. They're looking for someone to hold their hand to tell them. So in a situation with every new client, I set expectations. If I give you draft one of the logo that I've designed and you give me feedback, I tell them I will get you a revised version within X amount of days. Like you'll have 2 days and you'll have it back, and we can do this 6 times. I quantify it. In the same breath, if we're doing milestones, I'll say, hey, the first draft is going to be due by this date. It's going to be worth this much money. And once you submit it, they need to release that milestone or else we're pausing. We're pausing and we're reestablishing what's going on. If we're doing hourly work, the payment protection is available there too, as long as you're tracking that through the time tracker. But it is up to us as the independent professionals, the professional in the scenario, to set the cadence and to establish those different benchmarks. Just doing the work and hoping it all works out in the end is leaving a little bit of room for heartache, and I don't advise it. Let me
And Will,
see.
I think that just further reiterates like keeping communications on platforms so that in that rare occurrence that something doesn't go as planned or communications fall through, that history there is on the platform for customer support to review and help support with.
Definitely. Now, there is, I believe this may be the answer, a thread to pull on. But there was a question regarding what are the steps to verify payments so we can teach our clients. I walked through them earlier in the presentation, so you can feel free to watch the recording later, but I'm also going to just drop in the chat just a general FAQ article about it. But the process for the client is very simple to get payment verified. The settings, payments and billing, enter the credit card information, I think is the cliff notes. Couldn't be easier. Shouldn't take longer than 5 minutes unless they can't find their wallet. All right, let me see. We got time for maybe another question or two. Can I clarify what defines, actually, Caitlyn, why don't you take this one? Can you clarify what defines or constitutes a verified payment on the client's end?
Gotcha. So a verified payment is one that has been entered through Upwork systems, and we have gone through and run a verification step through our payment provider. So that's what we mean by a verification process there. And Will, I can happily follow up with our payment partners internally if we need to add more clarity there for future webinars and so forth.
Perfect. Let's see here. Oh, it's a great question. I don't know actually the answer to this. I'm not sure if you do, but is it okay for clients to post the same job a number of times, or would that be a bit of a red flag?
We do see this on occasion where because one of our sort features is by recency, that like sometimes a client will post a couple of times, but we also do see this tied to scam where especially across like multiple accounts, they're using the same job because it's getting quickly taken down and so forth. So I would say that like be very wary, especially if you're seeing contact information or that job is resulting, because a lot of times scammers will be repetitive in that as well. And sometimes it's within the same account, sometimes it's across accounts using the same language in a job posting. So occasionally it's human error from a new client, but we do see that as a scam MO. So definitely make sure you're flagging that as a red flag and looking out for other signals. Great
That's a
question.
a good follow-up question here to the payment verification. I know there's a lot of questions here, but it is an important topic. I want to provide a scenario for a little bit of context. I had a client that I was working with for a long time, and just ongoing work. And then one day, I see on the profile that their payment was unverified, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. I've been working with you for over a year. Turns out the credit card they had on file had simply expired. It had been past its, goodbye date. And so it said suddenly payment unverified. This was by no means saying that this was a malicious client or some devious attempt to, to get one over. There are a variety of reasons why a client can have payment not verified. I wouldn't jump to the assumption that it's malintent at first, but ask the right questions, provide the guidance on where they can go to resolve it, and any true client will have no problem taking these steps, and you'll be good to go. That's good for clarity. I'm glad everyone's
Yeah,
asking
and
these
that's a great
questions.
example, Will, because I know on our side we'll send reminders to a client to say, hey, this is about to expire, like let's get a new card on file. So it doesn't create any disruption to future contracts. But also on your side, just being that trusted advisor to get them back on track and back with a new form of payment is great.
Yeah.
Because they may have missed the email. We're all human. It
Yeah,
can happen.
it happens. There's a lot of things that go on in life for most folks. All right, everyone. I'm going to drop last time here in the chat 2 important links. First one is for the community events where you can find this recording and other events and upcoming events. The second one, I don't know if I mentioned, is Upwork Academy. If you are relatively new to the platform or looking to hone your skills, write proposals, what's an agency? How do I start that? Things of that nature. Check out the Academy. There's fantastic learning paths on just about every topic you can imagine. So Caitlyn, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me again this year for an updated version of this event. It was a great time.
Thank you, Will, and thank you everyone joining us for educating yourselves around this, keeping yourself safe, and for letting us know when you see something that doesn't look right on the platform. Myself and the team really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks and have a great week.